Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma Creagh, and earlier in the week I had the chance to sit down with Mannix Flynn in the Westbury in Dublin. He's a politician, a Dublin City Councillor and a writer. His documentary Land Without God is presently screening at venues all around the country.
Thank you very much indeed.
Very welcome. Yeah, so I think there's probably very few people that are completely not...
Everybody's connected.
Yeah, everyone is.
That's the interesting thing about it.
Yeah.
When you look at the sums, when you look at the trajectory, when you look at the longevity of it, when you look at the fact that it took place over tens of years, millenniums, it took place over decades. It was embedded right across. When you look at the middle class women who were abused and who can't open their mouth, and their children were forced off them and given up and sold. When you look at this whole idea of adoption, and you realise actually these weren't orphans, these were people that were actually taken off of people.
Yeah,
when you look at the global business, you realise then that actually this is actually much more than an institution. But because of shame, because of fear, because of the fear of being judged, the malignant shame, Irish people don't want to go there because they don't want to be associated with people who are basically, haven't fared well out of it.
Yeah.
People who have basically, ended up, in severe places like mental homes and institutions. So, the terrible fear was poverty. And remember, poverty is not just about, finances. It's about a whole business of not being able to look after it and ended up in a poorhouse. Most of the people in the poorhouse.
To that session as well, the way things are, it's very cyclical, and people are becoming poorer now.
People are becoming poorer. People are becoming in society now, they're becoming, very, disempowered. They're becoming very disadvantaged. And again, we address those in the film. We address the issues of class. I was the child in the children's court, found guilty, condemned, taken away at 6 in handcuffs.
Anybody that I've known to come out of them places are all in prison or dead, or back on the way back to prison.
You have a very kind of interesting background. How did you become attached to a documentary? How did that get on the cards for you?
Well, I've been involved in the arts for probably over 50 odd years, and as a child I would have been pretty artistic in the sense that I was around the city and I would have been enjoying its beauty and its architecture. So this is my haunting ground. This particular hotel was Clarendon Street School, girls and boys school. This particular hotel, that's where it was set. So all of this, my area is just up here, Mercer Street. Yeah. So Georgia Street, Grafton Street was all areas that I particularly played in. Here you had, in this particular area, a bohemian amount of people. You had doctors, nurses, you had all of the African doctors in the Royal College of Surgeons, you had the Bailey, you had all of those pubs with the Brendan Beans of this world and jumping around the place. And you had a very different sensibility in the city centre, and you were much more part of that. St. Stephen's Green, all of those things. So you got a stronger sense, and I got a great sense of art as a child because I mixed from school and went into the libraries, went into the galleries, went into the National Gallery, into Hugh Lane Gallery, into Dublin Castle. All of those places were wonders, places where there was massive adventure. So that gave me a sense of, of culture, of creativity. And I carried that through my life. At 20, I became an artist, an actor, performer, a writer, playwright, and did all of that kind of work. I'm a visual artist. So, documentary and filmmaking was always something that I was very interested in doing. It was something that I wanted to do. I planned this particular work out over a 20-year period. We spent 10 years researching and filming the whole process of what you see now. That took 10 years. And the idea of actually presenting the people as opposed to representing them and giving them their voice, giving them the witness statement was something that wasn't there in documentary, except in Shoah, in the Holocaust tapes, where you had witness testimony of those who suffered, which were very powerful, which a lot of work is based on, by the way, including Schindler's List. But this was something that needed to be done. We had the Ryan reports, the Murphy reports, we had testimony with people on the Joe Duffy show, with people on the Late Late Show. But in a certain sense, it was kind of, I'm not saying it was artificial, but it was through a medium. And we were seeing it in a very different way. Here you have the continuity of 3 generations of one family who spent almost 120 years in institutions. And for the first time in their lives, they're reflecting on this. They're reflecting on each other's stories, and their stories are unknown to each other. The only time that family became aware of each other's story was when they saw the film together.
Whoa.
And that was a profound moment. And the only time the class will understand the connectivity is when they come and see the film. And even in the IFI today and the Lighthouse, when people come in to look at the film, that's one of the things they cite, the connectivity, the class issues, all of those underlining things that they never really thought of. So documentary is the art form, documentary is the science, and the medium is the truth.
Okay, so you did your research first. There's obviously you gathered all the interviewees, some powerful stories there. Was it hard to get everybody to chat? Because it's
extraordinarily difficult to get people to chat. I mean, it's very difficult to even get people to chat in therapy, never mind, in a room, where you're filming them. So it was very difficult. It was very difficult for me. It was very difficult for them. And the film shows that. Nobody wants to talk about abuse. It's very difficult to prove abuse, very difficult to understand. You can understand, people who have been abused going onto a stand and having to relive it. But, I'm their brother. I'm, trusted. But equally, you're going into territory that you don't know what's going to happen. So it took us 10 years. Some people, we had to wait for 2 more years for them to come back to really think about what they actually wanted to say and, and how they were going to say it. And for the first time, even in the film themselves, people say, I never thought about it that way. I never looked at it. I never questioned that the same people that I met in my childhood and in the area were all in the same place. We thought everybody was like this, when actually, in fact, everybody wasn't. So there is this kind of invisible wall. There is this classism in Ireland. There is this business, of, where the poor are, commodified into a revenue for charitable organisations, so to speak, and that the middle classes, and the particular middle class women and families who are abused, don't see themselves as part of this story. It's really interesting, very interesting, because an awful lot of, women in the 60s who were raped or abused or, found themselves pregnant, went into these mother and baby homes, or went into nursing homes, and the children were taken off them. I meet them. I meet women in their 90s. So it took a while, and it took a long time for people to, and particularly for the individuals in my family, to begin to really understand what had happened, what they were committing themselves to. And, we were just blessed that we had the commitment of Lotta Petronella, the filmmaker, Maedhbh McMahon, the filmmaker, and the three was committed, no matter what, to the 10-year journey. And the difficulty of funding, the difficulty of location, the difficulty of editing. We had thousands of hours of footage. We had, each interview was up to 3 hours long. So it was a difficult, tiresome, angst, a process, not just for us, but for also the people we were speaking to. And we had to take deep breaths.
And it must have been very, it must have been good to give them a voice as well, finally, because I do think, in society, a lot of people are just not heard, and their voices do not matter to the powers that be or specific types of people. So, the thing about this is, if you watch this film, you're confronted by it. There's nowhere to hide. These are these people's true stories, and it's there. It's like we always see things on paper, and we go, "Isn't that terrible?" And when you're confronted in a specific way, it's harder to kind of quash it.
Well, again, this was the whole, structure of it, I mean, the first thing, you speak about people not hearing the voice. Sometimes the person who's speaking doesn't hear the voice.
Yeah.
Our approach to it was that the people that we were addressing and asking the question would first hear their own voice. That's why it took that length of time. So in some ways, it was a directorial, therapeutic approach. That you had people who were witnesses. They weren't on a witness stand, but they were given witness. You had to take a lot of time with that so as that they could understand exactly what it was they were saying and also own it, and then be able to actually then stand on that platform. It didn't really kind of matter who'd heard it or who was going to hear it, as long as they were able to hear it. And once they were able to hear it, they were able to say, we'll stand by that. Yeah. That's ours. And then that gave it that extra energy. You know what I mean? That honesty. Because the court will always say, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, but not the honest truth, because we don't have the time. Do you know what I mean? We can't have emotionalism in court. We need direct testimony, because that's the law, is the definitive. For us, it took that length of time for, the people who are going back into that place, looking at what was they had gone through, looking at the way they were now and how they viewed it now, and the revelation of all of that, and being able to actually stand in that truth and match that truth up. And I think that was really important. And when the participants heard their own voice in the final film, they were really, really able to say, yes, we'll stand by that. We would draw none of that situation, you know. So that's the way it was. They were given something that was really, really powerful, and that matched up. And as I say, you ask most people in Ireland how they are feeling, and they tell you how they're thinking. We operate from the head because we do a lot of avoiding. In the cinema now, we actually engage with people's feelings. And, you know, I've been around a couple of the cinemas, and the response from people is really interesting, because I'm not looking for whether they like it or dislike it. I just want to know that they feel it.
Yeah.
What are you feeling here? And that's what's really, really important. And most people aren't coming out angry, screaming their heads off to pull down churches. They're just kind of like, you know, informed. You know, they've had an experience that is different to any other experience that they actually ever had. So for me, you know, again, that property of hearing the voice, of giving a voice, you know, is first of all, you know, to give it to the people who own it, whose property it is, and then to share that to us.
And what was the process like for yourself making it? So 10 years is pretty grueling, and it could be quite filmmaking, even on a neutral subject, can be pretty emotionally draining at times. Something like this, was it therapeutic? Was it stressful? Was it torturous?
I think all of those things, you know what I mean, you know, well, they you think they have a bearing on something. They really, you know, they don't. You go through all of these particular processes. I didn't go through it and make it because I wanted to do therapy. You know, I want to do therapy, I'll go to a therapist, and that's their job, and they'll do that. I don't believe that the arts, you can write your way out of trouble or perform your way out of trouble. I think you always end up in that situation. I believe that if you have an addiction, it's not just about putting down the drug, it's about actually dealing with what it is that what it was, and also dealing with the fallout. So there were, you know what I mean, it was a tough, long journey to fund it, to commit to it, to get people to, you know, Lotta was working on other works in Finland. Maedhbh McMahon was working on other works in Ireland. I was doing politics. So you had to find the time to be able to meet the people. You know, you had to find the time to be able to meet the people at where they were at. You know, whether they had, you know, a good day or a bad day. You know, whether they wanted to speak, whether they didn't want to speak. This was a huge, huge process. It didn't come about through a quick fix, 1 month documentary shoot, and you deliver it to RTE or within 1 year or 6 months. It wasn't that. And we managed to get 100,000 off the film board. That went in a very short space of time on research. We had to get our own equipment in. We filmed, we recorded, we did it all ourselves.
And to have it for that amount of time as well, and to even work through all that footage to grade it.
We, you know, as I say, it took an awful long time, and there were some tapes that you just simply couldn't use because of the emotional intensity of it, you know, and because of, you know, I mean, it didn't, you know, fit with the sensibility that we were looking for. And slowly but surely, that truth began to emerge. So the 10 years, they were tough. And then to, you know, get the composition, to realise that we weren't going to use this, we weren't going to use that, we weren't going to use Irish music. We were going to approach this process in a very different way, say from States of Fear, which was a TV news documentary series, or even like, you know, Philomena, or Mea Culpa, or Deliver Us from Evil, or Spotlight. All of those things were all about revelation.
Yeah.
They were all about, like, you know, sensation. They were all about headlines. They were all about breaking stories, as this term that they keep using, breaking story. Oh, I broke that. And it's just like, you know, it's egomania. This wasn't about career. This was about putting something into our history, into our social history, into our memory, into our actual lives, into our social fabric that was real, as sure as anything existed. So we were airbrushing stuff out of our history here. We're airbrushing 1916 here. We're airbrushing so many things out. This was about actually putting it in and knowing what the state had done with their inquiries, with their this, that, and the other.
It was whitewashing everything, and how systematic it was. Yeah. I think that's the thing as well, where, you know, you hear of a story in a different realm and you go, okay, that's compartmentalized and that was terrible for that person at that time. To actually go through and see systematically that people were being kind of filtered into these systems from like as soon as
But
they
the state and the
Yeah.
church, and the state indemnified the church. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
They went out like knowing full well what had happened because they had the history books, they had the records, and pretended that the Ryan report was a terrible revelation and a terrible inquiry that had uncovered the dark past when they actually knew about all of this. This was all a fakery, mock shock. Oh my God, I didn't know what happened. But in actual fact, you did know what happened. So the society that we're in is beginning the process of owning this and asking questions. And a young generation of 20-year-olds, of 16-year-olds, of even 30-year-olds are now coming to this and going, I didn't know anything about this.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Extinction Rebellion. We're talking about, Green Party politics. We're talking about, housing the homeless. But it's all class-driven. But it's all class. It's like someone wrote an article recently about Extinction Rebellion saying, where are the diversity? Where's the black folk?
Yeah.
Where's the brown folk? Where's the people with disability? Which just seems to be. So this is about our society. Land Without God is about Irish society. It's our Holocaust in loads of ways. It's our defining moment. That when we actually had an opportunity to emancipate and assist the poor, who we'd made poor, we mangled them. We mangled our children, and we made it almost impossible emotionally for them to be able to get beyond, the conditions that they're living in estates. So the Labour Party, the people before profit, the left, the hard left, the trade unions simply exploit us as commodity, as poor, and sell us on the Late Late Show, on the Joe Duffy Show, on the Pat Kenny Show, on, the religious shows, in the church as the poor unfortunates. Yet all of that money that was handed in to the charitable organisations, where's the advancement? What has happened?
Yeah.
Where's the situation? Why are we waiting so long for Land Without God? Why are we waiting so long for Land Without God? Why did it take such a long time? It's not my story. It's not even my family's story. This is what happened in this society to tens of thousands of people. Do you know what I mean? Like literally tens of thousands of people. And we're not looking for pity. We're not looking for empathy. We're not looking for anything. We tell our story in a dignified way. We're not even looking for heads to roll. This is what happened. And we have to be able to kind of let that be what it is. And the film Land Without God is very much about that. And I would like everybody to come and see it because it is, in a way, it is a work of art. It is a creative process because we're dealing with film, we're dealing with the science of film. And I'm dealing with how you actually can take, the essence and the fragments of very delicate lives and be able to keep that delicacy, keep that integrity, not sell it short and make this testimony out of it.
And that's it. It really is a testimony. Like, it really is. And it's great to have just these things on record completely as well. Because, again, I just think certain things are not pushed or not heard and not given their proper place. And I think that's it.
We don't talk in Ireland. We yap. We don't have a conversation. We go into a pub now, it's big loud music. We don't really get down to the nitty gritty. People are uncomfortable. You want to talk about sexuality to get frees up. You want to talk about the recent child killings in relation to sexuality and child sexuality and what happened with the recent murders. What happened? You want to talk about paedophilia? They don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about what way child sex, all of that. No. Do families talk? No, they don't. They gossip. Do we talk about where did their actual sexual history begin? How did we come about this? We have a church that shamed the living daylights out of women and children, attacked women and children without
preyed
question,
on
and basically preyed on them. And still to this day thinks it has the right to have, ruling over the body. But this was tens of thousands. A woman walking down the street with a bit of lipstick, with a shorter skirt, with a pair of high heels, boom. You had situations where in workplaces women could be abused. There was no comeback. It was almost unthinkable when we went to Garda Corner with our stories. They didn't want to know. They said, "No, you're making it all up." Then they apologised. All of this thing has got to come out. If we're going to build a new Ireland, if we're going to build a better place, not just a fake name that they all run around with during election time, a better, fairer Ireland, that's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
A better place comes about when we have that conversation. Not in the kind of people's assembly that's all a setup, but a situation where the state's working for the people, not against the people. And all the political parties are working for the people, not just for their ideologies and their little games.
And that's
so,
it. And they're nice detentions and they're, they get in there, they do their time.
And that all works. But you look at the street, you look at the likes of, Merchants Quay, looking for millions of euros for a fake treatment centre known as an injection centre when they won't offer treatment and detox. Like the idea that you would build some place for people to use heroin without actually offering them all the other things is completely crazy. The other thing about it is don't forget, we're talking here about the issues of the legacies, which is not in the past, of abuse and the way people have to kind of get on with their lives and suffer. Every time they roll out the Artane band, in the Artane uniform, from the Artane institution, irrespective that those children are civilian children and they're never in the institution. It's from the institution. The uniform is from the institution. The name is from the institution. Although it's the Artane band, not the Artane boys band, we still shake. And we won't go to the games because of that situation. It's the only remaining institutional band in the world that stands there in that uniform. Is it appropriate, for instance, that there be no Nazis in the Nazi band? If it was Clongowes Wood College, and it was the Clongowes Woods College band, and there was a report into the abuses down there, that band would be long gone. If it was St. Louis, girls, and that would be long gone. So why do we have to actually face this crap where we were abused, where you have the Me Too campaigns out there, where you have the whole kind of, backlash and the whole proper order expose, but yet you have this. Why has the Me Too campaign not linked up with the issue of clerical sexual abuse or the institutions in Ireland? Because why have Hollywood not got involved here? Why have the musicians not turned around and said, it's not appropriate in this day and age that you roll out the Artane band, given its legacy? There's no excuse. And Dermot Ferreton, when he wrote his article in the Irish Times, saying this would be a reminder like a monument. We weren't consulted. Yeah. We don't need memorials of Magdalene Andres or some bullshit. No. We want truth. We want justice, and we want our stories out there. We don't particularly need a €3 million memorial in the Garden of Remembrance.
Why not use that money to help treat and pay compensation and do that with the victims when they're not, the church still aren't paying tax?
Because remember, all of these things were findings with no facts. You take the money, but nothing is being said. You take the money and you withdraw your claim. So down in Sean-McDermott Street, you have a big compound where the Magdalene Laundry was. And our councillors in Dublin City Council refused to let that go, to be turned into housing, to be turned into a community centre and a shopping centre for that area. These clowns jumped on the bandwagon that this should be some sort of memorial. These other clowns who got nearly €400,000 from the government staged this spectacle of Dublin Honours Magdalenes. Outrageous when I'm dealing with people who are in the Magdalene Laundries, who've no windows in their house, are in fuel poverty. And here you have a grandiose nonsense in Dublin City Council, the Mansion House, perpetrated by a whole bunch of academics and people who were using women and exploiting that for their own ends. It was atrocious. And then telling people who've got apartments or who are living in Dublin that you have to come and spend 2 nights in a City West hotel to be part of it, and then trying to steal their stories in this oral history that they're trying to create in UCD, or what Catherine's opponents trying to create, this fake oral history. You cannot create an oral history around this. You can only create a history of truth. And a truth is the monument. So Land Without God will be the only real strong testimony that will stand as the monument, stand as the memorial of what happened. And I want to make more of that particular kind of stuff. But the more people that see it have got to understand that these are really living human beings. I'm 40 years, 50 years at this. All of my work, has been around institutions and how to expose them and how to deal with them. And I would be a well person, but it breaks my heart to see many people on the streets who I know whose family were in institutions, and that dysfunction is passing on generation.
It
is. Land Without God is going to try and divert another generation of people growing up dysfunctionally because they weren't told the truth of what happened in their family. A woman came to me one day, she said, I noticed there's a name on one of your pieces on Leeson Street. It was a big piece of work I put on the corner of Leeson Street beside the Sugar Club, which was the first kind of Magdalene asylum back in the 1800s, on the bottom of where the Sugar Club was. That was the first of those kind of asylums and institutions. Yeah. And this piece relates to 180 women whose bodies were dug up out of Hyde Park, and the bodies were interred and then burnt over in Glastonbury to make way for the development. And I managed to get my hand on the file. And this woman, who was from a very respectable, well-to-do, rich family, just for some strange reason was passing by one day and noticed a name. And it took her an awful long time to contact me. And even the phone conversations would stop and start. And eventually she identified the name. And she wanted to know, did I have a file? And I said, I do have a file. It turned out that this was her grandmother. Her mother never spoke about it. She was the victim of her mother's non-speaking because her mother treated her in a very peculiar way because she was carrying this. And when she understood this legacy, which she didn't know about, she then understood her mother.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, we need this. And I've yet to come across a family in Ireland who wouldn't be speaking to me about an uncle, about an aunt, about a distant relation that was in some way connected into this. I know loads of people who thought they were somebody, and then when they looked into their backgrounds, realised that wasn't so.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, in the story of Philomena, you know, your man begins to realise that many Americans over there in America are going to have to reevaluate their Irish identity. Because this was perpetrated over a long period of time. And it not only was perpetrated in this country, but in Argentina, in Chile, in South America, in Africa. The Catholic Church, the religious congregations stole children and sold them off, trafficked them out of the country. And our state, to date, has done nothing to call these people to account, to bring them before a tribunal, to get them to tell the truth. The reason why that is because the Irish state and the agents of the Irish state were up to their bollocks in it. Yeah. They were part and parcel of it.
And they know if they admit anything, they'll be completely held at fault.
They were involved in a joint venture criminality. Yeah. They were involved in organised criminality with the Christian Brothers, with the Sisters of Mercy, with the Sisters of Charity. You know, right down. You go in and you take a look at that situation. We'd spent the 10 years travelling the length and breadth of Ireland, every single institution that we ever put together. Homes, industrial schools, orphanages, so-called orphanages. We spoke to a huge amount of people. We picked up fragments out of the ground of what was left of some of the institutions, and most of them intact. For instance, Limerick School of Art and Design. None of the people in Limerick School of Art and Design realised the horror of that place, that it was a Magdalen laundry, that it was an orphanage, that it was an industrial school. They hadn't a clue. And the hierarchy in there closed it down. Not many people out in Dunleary, the School of Film, knew that was an institution. They didn't understand that. The people in Letterfrack, when they tried to turn it into a wood turning course, the DIT in Waterford, we haven't addressed any of these issues. So don't forget, or even not Letterfrack, where it's the national park and all these kind of tourists are running across and not knowing that it's an outrage because the abuses took place. We wanted to build a piece of work that was uncomfortable but readable. That was where you could be a participant in this particular thing. We weren't trying to build something that was hysterical, and in the end of the day, we were trying to build something that had a responsibility like art does. Yeah. But we weren't, you know, if we were, for instance, if we were an American company, if we were a British company, if we were an outside company coming in with this film into Ireland, we would be the talk of the town. We would be on all the airwaves. We would be on the Late Late Show. It would be getting savagely promoted by the film board. It would be up there, left, right and centre. But because it's coming from us, it's kind of not really happening. And although we've made every effort, and the Eclipse have made every effort, and we've put everything we can into it, and it's going to extend for an extra week, we would like the National Airways. We would like them to actually promote this film. We'd like them to say, there's a great piece of work out there. Come and see. We've got 5-star reviews, 4-star reviews, and yet the Ireland of the arts and culture haven't really got out and said, support this. This is really brilliant. Get this into the class. Get this into the travellers. Get this into the jails. Get the people out of the flats to come and see this. And I find that really odd. That, you know, when Spotlight came in, huge promotion, because as I say, the IFI and the Lighthouse are going to extend this by another week. Yeah. We're now going to go to Galway in the Eye Cinema from the 25th till the 29th. Cork opened on Sunday, and it's in Cork in the Triskel for a week. So I'll go down and do a Q&A on the 29th. Perfect. I'll be doing a Q&A in Galway on the... Galway is the 29th.
Yeah.
Limerick will come up I think it's November. Derry is going to be, I think, sometime in November as well. And basically bring it around and allow people to see it. Remember, as I said again, this is not about us as a family. This is about us as a nation. This is about us as a people. This is about us as a society. You know, and you cannot, under any circumstances, you know, close the door on a past that you haven't looked at. And you never should close the door on the past. You always have to own that past, you know. And this is not about the past. This is about the now. You know, at the moment as we speak, there are people out there who are trying to find out who they are. The state won't give them the documentation.
Or they redact it all.
Yeah.
They redact it all.
There are people trying to figure out what happened to them. There are people trying to deal with child sexual abuse who are now in their 90s and are getting no help whatsoever. None. Remember, there are people who have disability and they're getting no help to deal with the issues that were happening in an institution. People with deafness, people with blindness who were in those institutions and were treated appallingly. There's no even counsellors to actually deal and sign to them or deal with their disability and be able to assist them, you know what I mean, in many, many ways. So we're really not even at we're not even at the beginning of the journey. We're only at the start and the tip of it. And as I say, the more people that actually see Land Without God, the more people will get a profound sense of their identity in this country and the fact that they can make change. I was locked away in institutions run by religious orders of brothers and nuns. No one escaped the harsh punishment for petty offences. 7 years, 6 years, 5 years for not going to school. All around me, the same thing was happening to my brothers and my sisters, and later to my nieces and nephews. Nobody believed us back then, and they still don't. Only we can tell this story. It's just that it's very important to also acknowledge, you know what I mean? I even hate that word acknowledge, you know what I mean? Like, you know, because I'm not including anybody. They are included, so it's not my preserve to do that. These were people that I worked with Maedhbh McMahon and Lotta Petronella, two women who work in the arts and in film who were actually profound. Without them, this would not have happened. Their sensibility, their intelligence, their integrity, the way they worked with me, the way we worked together was just really profound. And it's really important to acknowledge that, you know, because, as I say, they're as much a part of this and own this as anybody else. I mean, they should be here, and it's my duty to acknowledge that, you know what I mean, that, you know, there's one man and there's two women. Lotta Petronella is a profound filmmaker, great D.O.B., you know, a profound artist. Maedhbh McMahon, you know, her research, her meticulous recording, the Lau in Finland, who created the music, who made the compositions, were just profound. These were all with the Finnish connections there, you know, in Finland, the sound studios, really professionals. You were hard pressed to catch anybody with a cappuccino in their hand, or mind a glass of water. They just did the job. There was no messing around. I mean, Lotta, you know, flew in from Finland, worked in Connemara. We met. Maedhbh the same, you know, it was a really combine. All of the editing, all of the sound mixes, that was all done by Maedhbh and Lotta Petronella. Those people worked tirelessly, and they believed not just in the film, but they believed in the human beings that were in it. And all of a sudden, it became about, you know, human rights, human suffering, human voices pushed through and made visible and made present by Maedhbh McMahon, Lotta Petronella and myself. And I think that they are just phenomenal people to work with.